outside looking in. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Wednesday, April 3rd. It is 4:01 Eastern Time. Dow Jones finished down 111 points. Of course, it hit an all-time high yesterday. Sits at 14,550, down 0.8%. The S&P lost 16 points to 1553 from its all-time high, down 1.1%. NASDAQ also lost about 1.1%, down 36 points. Gold closed at $15.58, down another $17. I just checked. If gold finishes the week below 1560, and today was 1558, that would be the lowest weekly close since July of 2011. Oil finished down $2.80 to $94.40, and the 10-year Treasury, a bit of a safe haven play again. 1.81% is the yield. The market suffered at the beginning with a jobs report out of ADP Research ahead of Friday's report from the Labor Department. ADP's came in light, 158,000 versus expectations of 200,000, which is also the same expectation for the Labor Department report on March employment on Friday. An ISM service sector reading came in at 54.4 for March, down from 56 in February. There's still talk of 3%, but potentially 3% growth in the first quarter, maybe moderating to 2% in the second. If that turns out to be the case, that's great. But earnings season is now right around the corner, like starting next week. Looking for top-line growth and the accompanying statements as far as the outlook, the impact of Europe, and the outlook for Asia. Just one note from overseas. Frankfurt's market finished down 0.9%, but German new car sales for the month of March fell the most in almost 2.5 years, down 17% from a year earlier. First quarter car sales in Germany were down 13%. And the Financial Times had a story hitting late this afternoon that the Bundesbank has launched an investigation into claims that Deutsche Bank hid billions of dollars of losses on credit derivatives during the financial crisis. Investigators are going to be flying to New York next week as part of an inquiry into allegations that misvaluing credit derivatives allowed Deutsche to hide up to $12 billion in losses, which helped it avoid a government bailout. Okay, the rest of the time I'm going to spend on North Korea, which had a little something, maybe about 40 points worth on the Dow. Tensions continue to escalate. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel was speaking at the National Defense University in Washington this afternoon. He said the United States sees a, quote, real and clear danger from North Korea. Hagel said we take the threats seriously. The United States is sending an advanced missile defense system to Guam. But thus far, there has been no mass mobilization of the North's forces. And that's extremely important. We would pick up on that. But I personally believe North Koreans will try and take out a South Korean naval vessel as they did in 2010, killing 46 South Korean sailors. And that would be a gross miscalculation because South Korea, unlike in 2010, would retaliate in a big way, and the United States might be behind it. North Korea did today block more than 480 South Koreans from crossing the border to the jointly operated industrial park I've talked about before, Kaesong. So that raises doubts about the future of a major symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. North Korea did promise to allow 860 South Koreans currently staying in Kaesong to return home if they wished. But this is economic suicide for Pyongyang. The complex has been a source of badly needed cash for the North. It generates more than $92 million a year in wages for 53,000 North Koreans, employed by 120 textile and other labor-intensive South Korean factories there. Yesterday, the U.S. pledged to stand by South Korea, of course, and it sent another warship to the region after the North said it would restart the reactor at Yongbyon. Secretary of State John Kerry, at a joint press conference in Washington with his South Korean counterpart, issued a warning to Pyongyang. Quote, "What Kim Jong-un is choosing to do is provocative, it is dangerous, reckless, and the United States will not accept the DPRK as a nuclear state. The U.S. will do what it takes to protect ourselves and our allies, Korea and Japan, and we are fully prepared to do that." But this is farcical. The nuclear state bit. The United States already allowed North Korea to become a nuclear state. It's beyond trying to prevent it. Well, while the rhetoric being used by North Korea is a seasonal ritual surrounding the joint South Korean-U.S. military exercises, this year's belligerence has escalated to alarming levels, no doubt. Diplomats and security analysts are worrying the verbal barrage could be more than bluster. I thought Carol Williams in the Los Angeles Times summarized it well. In the past month, Pyongyang has announced that it is abandoning the armistice it has observed with South Korea since 1953, cut off emergency communications with Seoul, put its rocket forces on high alert, and threatened a preemptive strike against the United States for unspecified provocations. The regime has proclaimed itself in a state of war with South Korea, and on Tuesday announced it will restart the idled plutonium reactor to step up its nuclear energy and weapons programs. And Ms. Williams wrote that before today's blockade or blocking of access to Kaesong. Stephen Haggard, a professor of Korea-Pacific Studies at UC San Diego, sees the war of words as ritualized escalation and doubts either side is likely to take the first step that would set off a dangerous sequence of retaliation. But Charles K. Armstrong, director of Columbia University's Center for Korean Research, worries that the heightened rhetoric reflects a changed focus in Pyongyang on the United States as enemy number one instead of longtime adversary South Korea. Armstrong says, "I don't see any conceivable scenario in which North Korea would attack the U.S. mainland, even if it had the technological capability to do so, which they don't, but it is getting to be very disturbing how they are talking about the United States and broadcasting images of U.S. cities in flames." South Korea has also talked of a preemptive strike, Armstrong noted, and President Park could be under pressure from hawks who feel her predecessor failed to wage appropriate retaliation 3 years ago when the naval vessel was hit. The Wall Street Journal's Jay Solomon wrote a front-page story today addressing fears of a wider nuclear arms race in North Asia and the Middle East as South Korea presses the Obama administration for permission to produce its own nuclear fuel. Solomon writes, South Korea's government has reassured Washington during the negotiations that it isn't seeking to develop the ability to build nuclear weapons. This government has no intention at all of pursuing nuclear capabilities in terms of weapons, said a senior government official in Seoul. But American lawmakers and proliferation experts are concerned that the technology Seoul is seeking, the ability to enrich uranium and reprocess spent nuclear reactor fuel, would provide it with the key technologies to produce the fissile materials for a bomb. That capacity could further inflame tensions between the Koreas and risk sparking a broader arms race in Northeast Asia, potentially including Japan and Taiwan, which just seems natural. Republican Senator Bob Corker, the ranking Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, stressed that President Park and other senior South Korean officials said their government has no desire to pursue atomic weapons. But Corker said he was struck by how many other South Korean politicians, including a ruling party member, said Seoul now needs to reconsider its long-standing pledge not to pursue an atomic bomb. Corker added, for what it's worth, 2/3 of the population have said they'd like the country to have nuclear weapons. That was according to a recent poll. Similarly, Corker said he heard concerns from President Park and other South Korean leaders about the long-term commitment of the U.S. to maintain a military presence in Asia, in part because of Washington's fiscal issues. All right, Daniel Finkelstein of the Times of London wrote the following in an op-ed piece today. It's easy to dismiss Pyongyang's threats as empty rhetoric. Post-war history should teach us to take the noise seriously. And in other news, someone is threatening to start a nuclear war. These people are murderous, deeply eccentric, have tested nuclear weapons, and have just declared themselves in a state of war with their neighbors. Do I have your attention? Quite possibly not, I fear, because war, schmore, Sunderland have got a new manager. Mr. Finkelstein is referring to the Sunderland Football Club changing their manager. He continues, the threats being issued by the new North Korean leadership against South Korea are easy to dismiss. The regime is keen on overheated rhetoric, which usually comes to nothing, and even people willing to starve their own population to death for ideological reasons are less keen on dying themselves, as they surely would in a nuclear conflict. Besides, even if we thought the North Koreans might be serious, what can we do about it? But I think post-war history teaches that this is wrong. It teaches that it is wrong to simply dismiss the threat and wrong to believe that nothing can be done. The first history lesson comes from the book of Osama bin Laden, chapter 1, verse 1. If someone threatens to kill you over and over again, they might kill you. And it is not a good idea just to ignore them. Between 1996 and September 11, 2001, bin Laden repeatedly stated that he intended to attack Americans and that as long as I am alive, there will be no rest for the enemies of Islam, of which the United States was one. While it would be incorrect to say that this threat was entirely overlooked, it is notable that measures to respond to it were only put in place once he had killed thousands of people. The North Koreans have, just as bin Laden did, engaged in numerous small acts of war, blowing up a South Korean aircraft, shelling a South Korean island, torpedoing a South Korean frigate, blowing up members of its cabinet, while making their threats about a bigger act. I might have more of his excellent op-ed piece tomorrow. That's it for today. I'll be back with you on Thursday. Take care.